our country?
You know,
I don't know that we could document that, but I'd say
I don't think it's been documented, but I think it's worth exploring.
I think it's a very, very solid and good observation.
There's such heavy use of drugs, and that's well known, and we're into our second and third and probably more generation of drug abuse offspring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if we have mutated any form of chromosome damage, then that might account for some of the activity that we're seeing, because there are pedophiles who are younger and younger than ever before, too.
Wow.
Teenagers.
Yeah.
And a pedophile who begins practicing pedophilia, so to speak, they can, in their lifetime, molest upwards of 300 children.
Absolutely.
Because they will continue to molest till they are too old and feeble to walk.
Jeez, my gosh.
They can do it as very old men or as very young men, and anything in between as far as an age bracket.
And the men are not necessarily the only ones. We have women doing it, too.
We have women doing it, too.
Yeah.
But the percentages are greater in the men.
The male population.
Yeah, the male population.
Well, it all goes back to the Illuminati/Satanic movement in this country. And
but when you get to the point where there's a human life is not valued, then you've got real problems in a society.
Yeah, that's it.
And we're seeing evidence of that with the young people. When I think back to all that I've been through since day one of Johnny's kidnapping, and what that young man had to go through, it is a horrible, horrendous thing for any family to have to endure.
Noreen, have you heard, or maybe Ted, have you heard what is this program, what's entailed in this program for once they kidnap a child, what did they go through? How long does the programming last? I mean, because I know they torture them, they get them onto drugs, they molest them. I mean, what are some of the
sleep deprivation, food deprivation, hypnosis, combination of all that.
Drugs, the sexual abuse, and then once they have them indoctrinated to a point where the kids just don't know from what, then they force them to commit a felony. Usually, because that is also leverage, and it puts the fear factor into them that they could never run off and go to the police for help,
and
because they let them know, well, you've committed a felony.
And oftentimes that felony is murder.
And not only that,
that's correct.
They put the kids, they bring their children in for a human sacrifice, and I've talked to a number of survivors who told me this. And they put the knife above the victim's whatever, and the body in a particular location. It's all part of the ritual. And the child's hand is on the knife, and they tell the child to stash it or to go forward with it, to stab the person. And the children don't do it. So an adult comes along and puts his hand over top of hers and stabs the person. And then they tell the kid, see what you've done? And then that's where the guilty complex comes in. And that's where they blackmail the kids. Is that right, Noreen?
Well, that's exactly what Paul Benassi described.
Is that right?
And I've talked to probably, I guess in my 25 years I've interviewed over 200 of these survivors.
Really? My gosh.
I heard Rusty make reference to this federal trial or court case in Lincoln, Nebraska in 1999. I was in that courtroom when Rusty told that whole story to the judge.
What was that, Noreen?
I beg your pardon?
When was that? The story?
That was when Paul Benassi sued and won against Larry King.
Yeah.
And I was in the courtroom, and that was when I met Rusty for the first time. And I listened to him relate just about everything that he did tonight on the radio for the judge.
Is there anything he said in the courtroom he didn't say tonight?
Only the recent material just about gay canon and anything that would be added since 1999. But everything that he related tonight about how it all worked, the organization, how Larry King interacted and treated him. He also spent time talking about how he got into this in the first place.
Yeah.
Who the person was that introduced him to Larry King.
Soto, he said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tell us about Soto. Did you mention Soto the other night, Noreen?
I didn't.
You want to tell us about him?
Well, he was a private investigator in Des Moines. And Rusty and Paul Benassi both have identified him. Rusty identified him as the man who introduced him to Larry King and that he was part of this whole network. Paul Benassi picked his photograph out of a lineup of photographs and told Roy Stevens, the private investigator, that that is the man who brought the photographs of Johnny to a motel room the night before the kidnapping and said, this is the boy that we're going to take tomorrow. And on the back of the photograph, which was an 8 by 10, there was a diagram and an outline of our house and the street where Johnny would walk up to the corner and then how he would start his route. And Paul Benassi saw all of this, and he described this man, the way he acted, the way he dressed. He even described his aftershave lotion or cologne that he always wore. And this was just from seeing a black and white picture of the man. And he identified him as Soda, and he said the kids all called him Soda Pop.
Who was in that room, do you know?
Which room?
When Soto showed the picture, this is the boy we're going to kidnap tomorrow.
In the motel room,
Benassi said that Emilio was there, another man named Tony, and then Soda and Benassi, and then there was another kid, and he said his name was Mike.
Yeah, well, nobody knows what happened to Michael. Nobody knows his last name.
Sometimes he called him Mikey.
Yeah.
And he was there, too. But
how old was Paul at that time?
Paul is about 4 years older than Johnny. So Paul would have been about 16 going on 17.
Boy.
At the time of the kidnapping.
You know, it's draining, isn't it? I mean, you get so emotionally involved and you hear the stories, and for a normal person, this is so far outside of their normal thinking process that it almost freaks people out.
Well, it does, and I can remember back to the morning of the kidnapping, and Johnny was missing, and, you know, we didn't know what had happened, and I started calling the newspaper manager, and I got the names of all the kids that were at the corner that morning. So I called each one of the houses, and I started hearing this story about this man in a car, and he stopped Johnny, and a second man who followed him down the street, and the slamming of the car door, and the car screeching the tires as it took off.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden, it was just like spinning a nightmare right before me. I thought, what's happened here? You know, your mind can't catch up fast enough after something like this happens. And thank God we had witnesses. Because in a lot of kidnappings, you have a bicycle that they find, or a wagon, and nobody saw anything. So at least we had witnesses, so I am thankful tremendously for that.
Right.
What happened to the latest witness, Noreen, that's come forward in the last 2 or 3 weeks? Did anybody do anything with that? Anybody take affidavits or statements or anything?
We haven't done anything with it just yet. The young man, I'm not so sure. He still lives in West Des Moines. His father still lives in the same house. And the father is the one that was questioned by a news team that was here doing the story from another city. And they came to my house to...
This is 3 weeks ago, right?
Yeah. And they came to my house to interview me after they had been up at the location where Johnny was kidnapped and had talked to this man, this boy's father. So when they came here, they began relating